Hello, and welcome to the Business Pioneer Podcast, where we bring you conversations with today's most visionary leaders, disruptors, and innovators shaping the future of business. I'm your host, Erika Montgomery, and also the founder and CEO of Three Girls Media Inc., an award winning digital marketing agency. Today's guest truly embodies the spirit of entrepreneurial connection and global impact. Joining us is Dr. Ivan Misner, the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI, the world's largest business networking organization. It has over 11,000 chapters and millions of members in more than 75 countries. And Dr. Misner has been called the father of modern networking. He is a best-selling author, a sought-after keynote speaker, and a man whose work has helped generate literally billions of dollars in business for professionals around the globe. So today we're diving into how purposeful networking builds not just contacts, but powerful communities, and how relationship building is still one of the most underrated superpowers in business. Get ready to take notes. Dr. Meisner is here to share his journey into entrepreneurship, the importance of networking, timeless strategies, real world stories, and hopefully a vision for the future of meaningful connection in business. And of course, how BNI became the #1 networking organization in the world. Dr. Meisner, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Erica, and please call me Ivan. First of all, I love your live on air sign behind you. I think that's great. Listen, BNI has had millions of members over 40 years, but we are at about 350,000 members at the moment. We have had 40. We will have by the end of this year 41 years of consecutive growth, year on year on year for 41 years. There are very few companies that can say that, particularly through COVID. We grew even during COVID.
That's incredible. Remarkable for any business, let alone a networking organization. And full disclosure, I should mention for our audience that I have been a proud member of BNI for 14 months now, and it has been phenomenal for my business growth and education. And so 41 years is a long time to be in business. Take us back to 1985, the year I graduated from high school. What inspired you to start BNI back then? And did you ever imagine it would become the world's largest networking organization?
Um, so I'll start with the first question. I was inspired. I think BNI is a great example of necessity being the mother of invention. I was looking for referrals for my consulting business. I put together some people I trusted, and luckily they trusted me, and we referred one another. I did not have a plan to create an organization. I just wanted one group. But people kept asking me to open up additional groups because we only take one person per professional classification. And at the end of a year, we had 20 chapters, and I was shocked. And that was the point at which I realized that I had struck a chord in the business community, and then sat down and decided to create a plan to scale the business. And it was at that point that I realized BNI could have thousands and thousands of chapters at some point. I sat down and did calculations and looked at, this is before Monsieur Google, so I couldn't get online and do calculations. But I went to the library and got books and looked at populations and the number of cities, and determined that we could have over 10,000 chapters someday.
Phenomenal. And you did mention that there is one business classification per chapter. So
Yeah,
obviously that's one way that BNI is different from other networking groups.
right.
But how else is BNI different from, say, networking groups you might find in, say, a chamber of commerce or other similar organizations?
Well, we run a pretty structured meeting. You could go to a chapter in another country. We're in 75 plus countries. You could go to a BNI group in another country, not know the language, but know exactly where they are in the meeting and what's coming up next, which I always find amazing, to sit there and watch a meeting in another language and go, okay, well, I know what they're doing now, and I know what they're doing now. So, I mean, that's one of the things, is that consistency. And that's important for any business person. So if you're in business and you're listening to this, One of the things I really recommend is you want to be successful in business, do six things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times.
Mm.
And a lot of businesses do 1,000 things 6 times and they can't figure out why it's not working. It's not working because you got to do it consistently over and over and over and over. And it's one of the things that BNI has done well is we created a system and a process. We've replicated it. We teach people on it. And it's very much the same all around the world. Very focused on building relationships in business.
Yeah, and that is something that is very different about BNI is that part of the regular weekly meetings is education.
Yep.
I'm the education coordinator this year for my chapter, and it's a role I'm thoroughly enjoying because I'm learning so much. And then
Yeah.
I can, of course, pass that on to my fellow chapter members. But I love the focus on things like education. It's not just about referrals, and there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, well, I know it was Benjamin Franklin who said, if you pour your money into your head, you'll gain something that no one can ever take away from you, and that's education.
Mhm.
And so if you learn how to do something, it's something that no one can ever take from you. And one of our core values is lifelong learning. And I started writing books. I wrote the very first book ever written on networking and referral marketing. And so we try to use those books as well as other books by other experts in BNI chapters to help them learn how to network effectively.
You mentioned lifelong learning and that being one of BNI's core values. That's something else that, of course, makes BNI different. I think most networking organizations might have a mission statement,
Yeah.
but I've never heard of another one that had core values, let alone 7 core values. And one of those you mentioned is lifelong learning, another is giver's gain. What was your personal why behind creating a system that was built on that giver's gain philosophy?
Well, listen, that's a great question. And early on in the process, I realized that the best way to get business was to help other people get business. So to me, giver's gain is more than a phrase, it's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world, which happens to be our vision statement, changing the way the world does business. And we do it, that's the one thing that really makes, I think, BNI significantly different from a lot of networking groups, in that understanding that we're not just transactional, we're very relational. And the relationship comes from helping other people. And by helping other people in a structured way, they're going to help you in return.
Absolutely. I think that keeping relationships meaningful sometimes can be difficult when everything does often feel so transactional when
Yeah.
it comes to business. So, are there ways that you can recommend that professionals can keep those meaningful relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it begins with a foundation that I teach. And if you're the education coordinator, you've heard this. The VCP process: visibility, credibility, profitability. You first have to be visible. I mean, people go to networking meetings. I remember years ago, I was at a meeting with like 900 people. I was a keynote speaker, and I asked the audience, how many of you are here today hoping to, maybe sell something? And Erika, 900 people raised their hands. I said,
Oh,
great.
wow.
Okay, how many of you are here today hoping to, maybe just buy something? No one raised their hands, not one single
Surprise. Yeah.
person. Yeah. So everyone shows up at networking events wanting to sell, but nobody's there to buy. So why go to networking events? You go for the VCP process. First, you have to be visible. People have to know who you are and what you do. Then you have to establish credibility, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it, and they trust you. And then and only then can you get to profitability, where people know who you are, what you do, they know you're good at it, and they're willing to refer business to you. And so one of the things that really sets BNI aside is understanding this VCP process and the time confidence curve, that no matter what business you're in, it's going to take time before people have confidence in your ability to provide a quality product or service. I just wrote a book. It just came out a couple of weeks ago called Networking is a Marathon, Not a Sprint. And I think that really identifies the process, I think, in a way that most people don't understand. They think it's, hi, Erika, my name's Ivan, let's do business. And it becomes very transactional. Whereas if it's relational, it's long term. And so you have to go into the process understanding that it's got to be a long-term process.
Absolutely. And, things have changed so much in the last 15, 20 years, I would say, when it comes to things like technology. Now
Yeah,
we've got social media, we have things like LinkedIn, and we're doing this interview on Zoom.
yeah,
And how would you say, and then of course, the other thing I want to mention is that some BNI chapters meet online only
yeah.
on platforms like Zoom. Others are in person. And then you have the third option, which is hybrid, some online and some meetings on Zoom. So, how has technology really changed the art of being able to build those genuine business relationships when you're not always together in person?
Well, first of all, technology has flattened the communication hierarchy. It's enabled people to communicate with each other in ways that we didn't have when I started BNI in 1985. In 1986, a year after I started BNI, the second largest line item in my budget was the telephone bill. Okay, the
Mhm.
telephone bill was massive. And today, I don't even know where the phone bill is in our budget. It's insignificant because we have this kind of technology. So, technology has flattened the communication hierarchy, allows us to communicate in ways that we never could before. I couldn't communicate to hundreds of thousands of BNI members. Not that we had them in the 80s, but if I'd had hundreds of thousands, I wouldn't have been able to communicate with them like I can now through technology. What's interesting is that in the late 90s, the media was mostly saying to me, do you think this technology is going to really destroy BNI? And in our first 11 years of BNI, we opened 500 groups from 1985 to
Ooh.
1996. But from 1996 to 2007, after the internet, we went from 500 to 5,000. So the internet has helped the growth of networking. It is a little bit different in some ways, but it's still about building relationships. During COVID, when COVID started, we had 9,800 groups that met in person worldwide. And in literally weeks at a time, country by country, we flipped to online so that we had close to 10,000 chapters that transitioned completely online during COVID. Now, after COVID, 15% of our organization meets completely online. 15% of our organization is hybrid. They meet in person 1 week, online the rest. And 70% of the organization has gone back to meeting in person. So in person is still the preferred way to network. But I think that over time, and as we get less people with gray hair like mine, we're going to see more people transition to the hybrid because it's the best of both worlds. Now, if you're in BNI and you're listening to this, I'm not telling you to go become a hybrid chapter. I'm saying I think that's where the future probably is because it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to networking in the digital age and everyone, meeting online all the time?
Well, I think, that no, we don't teach this in colleges and universities. So what happens is people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. And they have that networking disconnect where everybody shows up wanting to sell, nobody's there to buy. So, with technology, you can do that at light speed. So it's face-to-face cold calling at light speed. I mean, think about LinkedIn, and I love LinkedIn. I'm active in LinkedIn. I recommend LinkedIn, but think about how many times you get spammed on LinkedIn where people says, contact you and say, hey, would you like to buy my product or service? And they don't even know you. I mean, the ones
Mm.
that crack me up are the ones that say, I have a lead generations, list where you can buy my list for leads. And I'm like, man, you didn't even read my profile, did you? You don't know who I am or what I do. You don't know that I run a referral organization. So people just use it in ways that I think are not terribly, I don't think terribly successful.
Hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So let's talk a little bit about leadership and growth and
Yeah.
mindset. As BNI started to grow into this global brand
Yeah.
relatively early in the journey of growth, how did your leadership style evolve and change?
Well, it's a complex issue, leadership. Let me give you the big overall vision that I have on leadership, and that is that leadership is not about managing and complying. Leadership is about mobilizing and inspiring. That's what leadership is about. Now, managing and complying is important. So I'm not suggesting that those things aren't important. I do believe they are important. But when you are doing management, you're doing compliance within a BNI chapter, within a company, you apply the rules more like Mandela than Attila. And if you do that effectively, you're gonna hold people accountable. Accountability is one of our core values, and you have to hold people accountable. But leadership itself is about mobilizing and inspiring. I can't motivate people. There's a difference between motivation and inspiring. I People can motivate themselves, but there's a chance that I can inspire them to motivate themselves. Motivation
Mm,
comes from within. Inspiration oftentimes comes from outside. And so my focus as a leader is to try and inspire. I ran the company for 30 years. About 10 years ago, I brought in partners into the company who run BNI. So I went from being, King Arthur, building the business, leading the charge, to being Colonel Sanders, where I'm sort of the spokesperson of the organization. So this is what I get to do for a living, is interviews like this, which I love.
nice. What was
You,
one?
would you like one more thing on leadership that I think is
Yes,
important?
please. Absolutely. I'd love it.
And this may not be important to everyone. It was important to me because of my behavioral style. And it was on my office desk, whatever my main office is, because I've had offices in different places. I've always had this paperweight, and it was given to me by my mother when I was 13 years old. I'm 69. When I was 13, she gave me this paperweight, and it says, "Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way." Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way. And she said, honey, I love you, but you are a bull in a china shop. You just like knock people over. You have got to learn how to be more diplomatic. You've got to learn how to work with people. And she said, this is about collaboration, not manipulation, but you have to learn how to collaborate and lead people if you want to, and coach them into their greatness. And it was great advice. And it's advice that I have throughout my career had to remind myself of periodically, because sometimes I feel like just smacking somebody up the side of the head, but that's assault, not leadership. And
Yeah.
so diplomacy is, for me, an important aspect of being a good leader.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And speaking of leadership and helping people learn how to run their businesses more effectively, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who maybe struggle with things like delegation or letting go of control? Because I know that that's certainly an issue for me. I'm a control freak and I'm the first one to admit it. So,
Yeah,
sometimes for me, letting go is challenging. I've gotten much better at it over the years. But I know for some people that's really scary.
it is for most people. The bottom line, though, is you can't scale if you don't delegate.
Mm.
So here's a concept. I was not taught this in college. I've developed it, talked about it on my own. When you delegate, you have to delegate both responsibility and authority, both. So what we tend to do is delegate responsibility, but not authority. And so when people screw up, we step in and we go, oh, man, it'd just be easier to do this myself. And that's true for like a month or two, but eventually You can't scale unless you delegate both responsibility and authority. Now, you bring in a new person, you cannot delegate 100% authority to them. So you
Mm.
delegate a percentage of authority. Let's, for argument's sake, say 50% authority, and you say to the person, anything within this box, within this range, just make the decision. You'll be okay. You won't get in trouble. If I need to redirect you, I will, but you're not going to get in trouble. Anything with you. Then over time, you give them 60% authority, 70% authority, 80%. Eventually, for me, it was up to 95% authority. I always held back two things. One was a budget, and the budget varied depending on who the employee was. So if it was the receptionist, it might have been, $50 or $100. If you need something in the reception area, just buy it. If it's under this number, you don't have to get approval.
Mm.
Now, see, my chief operating officer, it might have been $10,000. It'd be like, just do it. Anything up to this amount, just do it. You don't have to come to me. That's when you get to 95% authority. Okay. The second thing was money. Budget was one, and it varied depending on the profession, the position. The second was legal. So if some legal issue comes up, somebody's talking about lawyers, then it's got to come to me.
Mm.
Those are the only two things. And I was pretty successful at delegating responsibility and then over time authority. So when you do that, you're able to scale. Now, don't worry about whether someone's going to make a mistake or not. They will.
Mm.
It's inevitable. Recognize that. I recognize that some of the biggest mistakes that were made in my company, I made. So, it's hard to get really mad at somebody when they make a mistake. And I had an employee once who made a mistake and it was over her budget, but it was a complex issue. It was like a $5,000 mistake. And this was 15, 20 years ago. It was a lot of money. And I called her into my office and she said, are you going to fire me? And I said, well, tell me what happened and tell me what you may have learned from this. She told me what happened and she told me what she learned from it. And I said, well, what would you do if you were confronted with this potentially in the future? And she gave me an answer. What I was looking for was, did she make the mistake because of negligence, a misconduct, or was it just an honest mistake? And it was not negligence. It was an honest mistake. And so I listened to her and I said, no, I'm not going to fire you. And she said, thank you. Why? Why? Because that was big. And I said, well, because I just invested $5,000 in your training. And I don't think you'll ever do that again, will you? And she's like, oh, I'll never do that again. I'm like, okay, fine. So, go and sin no more. So it was, it was a big mistake, but she didn't do that again. And then she was a loyal employee because I didn't cut her loose over an honest error. So people are going to make mistakes. I can guarantee you the mistakes I've made were worth way more than the mistakes of any employee who worked for me.
Yeah, I can absolutely say the same. I just celebrated my 20th year in business, and I have made more mistakes than I can count. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I will continue to make mistakes,
Yeah.
but every single mistake that I've made, I've learned a tremendous amount from. And like you said, you don't make those mistakes again, or at least you shouldn't. So,
No, and isn't that key? I mean, a lot of people make mistakes and then they define themselves by their mistakes. I view my mistakes as my tuition for success.
yeah.
I've paid a lot of tuition, but I view them as my tuition. I define myself by my successes, and I've had enough to cover up the failures along the way and the tuition that I paid. And I think people really get obsessed with the mistakes they made and they define themselves by those mistakes. And that in itself is probably the biggest mistake that someone can make.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that this year in BNI, my role in the chapter is education coordinator. But last year, my first year in BNI, I was the social media coordinator. And so I was responsible for managing our chapter's Facebook page and LinkedIn page and so on and so forth. And every Thursday, we would share a Ivan Misner quote. And I would have this little graphic that had your headshot, and I would find a great quote that we would put up there
An
on the
Ivanism.
graphic.
We call them Ivanisms.
Yes, yes. So I found a lot of Ivanisms to use on every Thursday as social media coordinator for our chapter. And one of my favorite all-time quotes of yours is networking is more about farming than hunting.
Yeah.
And when I first read that for the very first time, I was like, what? I stopped and I had to think about it for a half a second, and then the light bulb went on, and I thought, how brilliant. And so, can you explain that philosophy for
Yeah.
listeners who might be new to the concept, might not be in BNI?
Yeah. Well, what it means is it's about cultivating relationships. If you are hunting for your business, you basically eat what you kill, and that's it. But if you're farming, if you're cultivating relationships, you can get business when you're on vacation. Referrals can come into your office while you're gone, and your company can get business while you're gone because you've cultivated these relationships where people are referring business over to your company. So, and of course that's a little bit more long term, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's about building these long term relationships, and farming is more long term than hunting. And that's the whole
Sure.
concept with it. And it kind of fits, it's a different metaphor, but it kind of fits with the latest book I did. That networking is more about networking is a marathon, not a sprint. It's long term. And if you are networking as a sprint, you're just going to burn yourself out and you're not going to get a lot. But if you understand that it's a marathon, it's long term, then you're much more likely to be successful.
Absolutely. So, what's one story from your career that you think really illustrates the power of that long-term relationship or referral?
I think probably one of the best examples of long-term relationship development was an article that I wrote. And let me give you the context. And if you were the education coordinator, you may have heard me talk about this at one point. I was on Necker Island, which is an island in the Virgin Islands. And the first time I was there was 2007. And back then they only had internet in one place. And I had an article that was due that day. And I had to write the article. And sometimes you're kind of stuck. You don't know what you're going to write about. And I didn't know what I was going to write about. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I was in the great room on Necker Island, 300-degree view of the ocean and the island, just gorgeous. And I had to write an article due that day. I'm sitting there and up walks Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson. And he says, "So what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I have a deadline for an article today." And he said, "Oh yeah, listen, I get deadlines, but look, when you're done with the article, we're all down at the ocean by the ocean pool. So come on down to the pool or come on down to the ocean. Let's hang out. And if I don't see you down there, sit next to me at lunch and let's talk. I want to hear more about this BNI thing." And I said, "Great." And he walks off, and I thought, dang, how did I get here? How did I get to this moment where a billionaire walks up and says, "Hey, come on out and play. Let's go on out and play. And sit next to me in the lunchroom and let's talk." And it hit me, the answer to your question. It hit me, the butterfly effect of networking. So the butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, which is a division of mathematics that says the flapping of the wings of a butterfly affects something in the environment that affects something else, that affects something else, that affects something else, that affects the weather. And so what I did for that article was I reverse engineered how I got there. And it was a 2.5 year process. Talk about marathon, talk about
Wow. Yeah.
farming. Okay.
Uh-huh.
2.5 years earlier, a solopreneur BNI member who was a life coach asked me for help on something. And I said yes. And her name was Kim. And I said yes to Kim. And as a result of me doing that, I was invited to do a speaking engagement. I did a speaking engagement. I met Jack Canfield, who wrote the books Chicken
Ah,
Soup for the Soul,
sure.
Success Principles. I ended up becoming very close friends with Jack. Jack invited me to the Transformational Leadership Council, which is a group that meets twice a year. And all of these things happened. The flapping, it was a ripple effect, one thing after another thing after another thing. And from all of that, I got invited to a seminar on Necker Island 2.5 years after Kim asked me if I would do something for her. And I said yes. And so from that, it led to me going to Necker. And there on Necker, I met Branson. And I've been invited back 4 more times. I've been to Necker Island 5 times now and have met, I've spent 5 weeks with Richard Branson. And it happened because of me being willing to network like a farmer, not a hunter.
Mm,
And it takes time for that to play out and for people to trust you enough to invite you to something important.
yeah. Yeah. What a story. Thank you so much for sharing, Ivan. That's incredible. I think that a lot of times as business owners, we look at our success in only one way, and that's dollars, right?
Yeah.
How much revenue are we bringing in, and are we profitable? But there are so many other ways that you can measure success and true ROI in your business and in relationships, not just in dollars, but in growth. So, how would you say that small business owners can measure that ROI of relationships?
Well, look, I agree with you. I mean, a business is in business to hopefully make money. So I certainly want my members to make money. But if that's your primary focus, then you're probably not going to make as much money as you can because you're not really making a difference in people's lives. And that's the key on ROI, personal ROI. Your own business ROI is to help other people's ROI. And I would describe it this way. We all have people that are in our story that we could talk about it. For me, it would be some high school teachers, some college professors, some business people like Jack, my parents. These are all people that are in my story. I could tell stories about all of them. But but that's not the most important thing in life. The most important thing in life is not who's in your story. It's whose story are you in?
Mm, mhm.
Whose life have you changed in some way? Who have you impacted in some way where they tell your story and where their story about you in their life? That's an amazing ROI. And if you can do that in business where people are talking about how you changed their life in some way, then I think that's a life well lived.
Yeah.
For us in BNI, we talk about how much money our members make. And to us, that's what's most important. And I can tell you that in the trailing past 12 months, I just saw a report this week, the trailing past 12 months, our members passed 17.6 million referrals.
Wow.
17.6 million referrals. And from those referrals, they generated 27.1 billion with a B, 27.1 billion US dollars in thank you for closed business. That's the amount of business that our members say they made, not us. Our members say they made. Now, just to put that in
Incredible.
perspective, Erika, based on United Nations estimates of GDP, gross domestic product, UN estimates of GDP, there are actually 100 countries in the world with a lower GDP than what BNI generated in thank you for closed business in the last 12 months. Now
Ah,
that blows my mind.
amazing. Mind blown for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I would say that looking back, you have so many things to be proud of in regards to BNI's impact. That's one of them, certainly. But
Yeah.
are there other things that really stand out in your mind in regards to, BNI's legacy and things that you're really proud of?
Well, listen, I think your life is your legacy. What you do, how you show up in the world is the legacy that you lead. I wrote a book called Infinite Legacy about 2, 3 years ago. It came out. And one of our opening quotes, I'll paraphrase it. It's Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, "We all die too soon or too late, and yet our life is complete at that moment with a line drawn neatly under it, ready for the summing up. We are our deeds in life and little more." And that's sort of my belief on legacy. It's really whose story are you in, whose life have you helped to change. Legacy is not about. It's not just about money.
Mhm.
My parents left an amazing legacy in certainly in me, I feel, and they had no money. They were reasonably poor, and but yet they left an incredible legacy. Any people skills I might have, I got from my mother, not my dad. He was
Mhm.
he was not a real people person, but I got my work ethic totally from my dad. So I got my work ethic from my dad, my people skills from my mother, and that was an amazing legacy that they left, and it had nothing to do with money. Now, I've left some money for charity, which is good, but I'd like to think that what I've left more than that is an impact on people's lives.
Mm. And I think in so many cases, that's the most important thing of all,
Yeah,
right? Is not the money, but how you can really impact people's lives and affect not only how maybe they see themselves, how they run their business, how they
yeah.
become successful, and how they see success. There's so many things that could potentially be wrapped up in that. So that's
Yeah,
really
and it's not all
incredible.
just about the referrals in the business. I have so many
Yeah.
BNI members who say, before I joined BNI, I couldn't even stand up and talk to a group of people publicly, but now I stand up every week and I, say who I am and what I do, and I'm able to stand and speak extemporaneously to a group of individuals, and I've heard amazing, amazing stories about people whose lives have changed because they could stand up and talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, it reminds me that when my mom was growing up, she was very shy, horribly shy. And so when she had me, she wanted to make sure that I did not grow up painfully shy like she did. And so she made it her mission to enroll me in everything. I took dance, I took gymnastics, I was a baton twirler, I was in a band, I did pageants, I did it all. So she really wanted to make sure that I was exposed to doing a lot of things, and especially in the pageant world where I would be interviewed on a regular basis.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't be shy like she was.
yeah,
And she wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with myself and overcoming the fears that she had. And I think a lot of people that are new to networking might be afraid of the public speaking aspect in networking, especially in BNI, where we have these segments called feature presentations, where a member has 8 to 10 minutes
yeah.
to give a big presentation about their business and what it is they do.
Right,
And so, how would you say that people can overcome that fear of either having to self promote
right.
or the fear of rejection?
Well, first of all, I would say it should be less self-promotion and more education. Because if you
Mm,
teach people how
mhm.
to refer you, you're going to be a lot more successful than just doing self-promotion. But let's take the
Sure.
person who's afraid to do that feature presentation, which is, anywhere from 8 to 10 or 12 minutes, depending on the size of the group. I remember once, many years ago, having an accountant in a chapter, and it was her turn to do her feature presentation. And she said, "No, I'll pass. I don't want to do it." And the secretary treasurer was like, "Well, no, you're coming up in 6 weeks. You're it." And she's like, "No, not going to do it." And the secretary treasurer said, "This is a great opportunity for you to really explain what you do." And she was like, "If I have to do it, I quit." Yeah, that's what she said. I was there. And she said, "If I have to do it, I quit." And we were like, "No, no, no, don't quit. But this is a great opportunity for you to explain what you do." And so there are tricks that you can do to do presentations. And here's one of them. I said to her, "Look, all right, forget about the talk. Forget about doing a presentation." I said, "Can you give a test to everybody in the room about tax law?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Come up with 10 questions about tax law and just say, you know, read the question and say, how many say true? How many say false? And then give the answer. Don't go into detail. You're not doing a speech. You just give the question, true, false, answer. That's it." She said, "I can do that." And so she did that. 6 weeks later, she had these 10 questions. Erika, by the fifth question, people were in hysterics because like half the room was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to jail. I mean, I've gotten almost all of these wrong. I can't believe this." And now she's speaking extemporaneously. She's laughing. They're laughing. She went over time. The president had to pull her down because she just forgot that she was doing a talk. And instead, she was just sharing her knowledge. And it worked really
Wow.
well. Yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great.
Amazing. What a phenomenal story. So, um, you know, I think that after you having been in business for 40 years and me being in business for over 20 years, one of the things that we naturally look at is the future, right? What's happening for the next 20 or the next 40 and what's going to take place then. So, how do you see things like networking evolving in the
Yeah.
next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I honestly don't think anyone can clearly see beyond 5 years. I mean, 5 years is a stretch. My crystal ball generally goes out about 5 years or so. There were things like how many chapters that I thought we could have. That was a long term vision. But immediate changes or significant changes in business, I don't think you can see real far out. So here's my advice to people: be prepared to pivot. Either lead the disruption or you're going to be disrupted. Disruption is here to stay. Uh, and certainly with AI, it's in the forefront. Don't be one of those companies that gets disrupted. Like Kodak is to me one of the best examples of a company that was totally disrupted and didn't have to be. Kodak invented the digital camera. They invented it. They had the patent on the digital camera. And they were like, well, if we start making digital cameras, then we're going to lose our film processing business. So let's license it out to other people. So they licensed their digital technology to other companies. Kodak could have been Apple. I mean, Apple was a computer company. Who would have thought
Yeah.
they'd do telephones, right? Telephones with cameras. What kind of cameras? Digital cameras. Kodak could have made that transition just as easily as Apple, but no, they didn't want their film processing business to be disrupted. As a matter of fact, there's a memo from a vice president of Kodak where he said to management, we don't want to proceed with the digital camera business because who's going to ever look at photographs on a computer? They
Ah,
want, it's like, wow, you got to be looking to the future. Sears is another great example to me. Sears
mhm.
closed down their catalog. You may be too young to remember the Sears catalog, but the
Nope,
Sears,
I do remember it.
okay,
Yep.
remember it was like that thick. It came out, I don't know,
Yes.
came out like maybe every quarter or every 6 months. Sears, I might be getting the years off by just a year or two, but Sears closed their catalog right around 1993.
Hmm.
It could have been 94. And then 94 and 95, Amazon Incorporated.
Ah, okay.
Sears could have been Amazon. If someone from
Yes.
Sears had said, hey, this internet thing, maybe we should really look at this and start selling socks on Amazon and shoes and drills. And, we can sell this stuff on online,
Mm-hmm.
online. But Amazon saw it. They started with
Mm-hmm.
books, but then they expanded. So a Sears could have been Amazon. They were
Yeah.
disrupted. So
Mm-hmm.
the answer to your question is lead the disruption. Don't be disrupted. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to be first in front, but be near in front. And people
Yeah.
think, BNI, we're an in-person networking organization. Yeah, but we've always been connected to technology. Think about it for a moment. Our website is bni.com. You have to be an early adopter to technology to have a 3-letter domain.
Mm.
You can't get any 3 letters today unless you're buying it from somebody who already owns it.
Yeah.
So BNI.com, I mean, we were an early adopter to technology. And I think that's in your crystal ball. Think about your business and what's disrupting your business and how can you lead that disruption?
Love that.
For
Yeah.
us, it's online. As you can see,
Mm.
we've moved
Sure.
some of our groups to online.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. My chapter being an online chapter works great for me. Most people don't know I'm disabled. I don't drive. So, uh, having an online option for me for a chapter is brilliant.
Great.
I'm
Yeah.
able to fully participate and don't have to worry about, getting my husband or someone else to drive me to meetings. So,
Right.
yeah, the online works really well for me. But what I think is so great is that there's an option for everybody, right? I
Yes.
mean, there are so many chapters. If you want to do solely in person, you can do that. If you want hybrid, you can do that. If you want online, you can do that.
Right.
There's something for everyone in BNI.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, now more than ever, with these options, people can take the option that works best for them. If I were still a business consultant, I sold my consulting business decades ago, I'd probably join a hybrid group. And again,
Mm.
I'm not telling BNI chapters go hybrid, but I probably would join one because I believe in the power of in person, but
Mm.
the ease of, doing meetings online. You put a coat and jacket on. Don't ask me to stand up because I'm wearing sweatpants, right? And Crocs. So, the ease of being able to do meetings like this is fantastic. But yet, meeting in person once a month, that's kind of my leaning. But online, we have as many online groups as we do hybrid.
Yeah. And, even though we are an online chapter and that's how we do our weekly meetings, we still get together in person
Socials,
periodically.
good.
Yeah. And do socials. Just this, a couple of days ago was Halloween. And I had the entire chapter over to my house for a Halloween potluck. We had a brilliant time, so much fun. And it was wonderful to see everybody in person and spend some, casual, just having fun time together.
That's the secret, I think, of a hybrid, of a not a hybrid, but online group is to
Mhm.
do some socials so that you do, in fact, get together and meet in person. I mean, sometimes you can't get a haircut over the phone. You got to
Yeah.
show up, right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes meeting in person, there's just a power to that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, as we wrap up this episode of the Business Pioneer
Already, has it
podcast,
been an hour?
I know,
Holy.
I can't believe it, but yes, we're coming up on that time. I'm curious, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to every business pioneer listening right now?
Well, I'll remind you of one, and then I'll give you the other. 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times. That's where people really go wrong. And by the way, it doesn't have to be 6. It could be 5. It could be 7. But you do a handful of things, and you do it over and over and over and over again consistently. The one thing we haven't talked about is I think an entrepreneur needs to work in their flame and not in their wax. And when you're working in your flame, you're on fire, you're excited, you're passionate about what you're doing. People can hear it in your voice, they can see it in the way you behave. When you're working in your wax, it just takes all your energy away, and people can see that in the way you behave, and they can hear that in your voice. So find your flame and work in that, and then delegate your wax to other people. uh, I'll give you do we have time for an example?
Yeah, absolutely, we
Okay.
do.
So one of the first people I hired for BNI, one of the first, not the first, was a bookkeeper, because I was doing all my own accounting. Early on, I was doing
Mm.
it all myself, QuickBooks, doing it myself. So I was like, I hate this. I know how to do it, but I don't like it. So I
Uh-huh.
hired a bookkeeper, right? Bookkeeper came in first month. She balanced the books. I had never balanced my checkbook. I hate it, right? So I didn't balance it. There's cash in there. I roughly know what's okay. I know my cash flow. So she balanced the books. She said, well, you were 3 pennies off, 3 cents off being balanced. And she said, I wanted the books to be balanced. And so it took me about 2 hours, but I found the 3 pennies and your books are balanced. And I told that to a friend of mine. And he said, well, did you reprimand her for spending 2 hours, 2 hours to find 3 cents? I said, no, I congratulated her. He said, why would you do that? I said, because if it were $5, she would have definitely kept it. If it were $50, she would have dove in to find it. If it were $500, she wouldn't have gone home that night. For
Mm.
me, for me, if it was $50, I'd have gone, close enough. That's close enough. 500, I'll work on it tomorrow. But
Uh,
see, that was her flame. Her
mm.
flame was the bookkeeping, totally my wax. So you hire people that are in your wax, but it's their flame. And they're going to do not as good a job as you. They're going to do a better job than
Mhm.
you. And if you delegate responsibility and authority over time, that's where it plays out. And that's how you scale a company.
I think that's so brilliant. And I have to tell you that hiring a bookkeeper, I'm sure, is one of the best business decisions you made. And for me, it was certainly one of the best business decisions and personal decisions that I made for my business,
Yeah.
because the bookkeeper that I ended up hiring to take care of my books, because I'm terrible at math, ended up becoming my husband. So
Very good.
yes,
Excellent.
and we just celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary. So,
Whole different level of
um,
networking.
yes, absolutely, a whole different level of networking. But I got the best of both worlds, let me tell you.
Good for you. Good for you. I met my wife. I was married for 31 years. My wife passed away 5 years ago. But my current wife, we've been married just under 2 years. Was a referral. It
Oh,
literally was a referral from Jack Canfield's business partner.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
Jack's business partner woman said, you really need to meet this woman, Jody. She's an amazing woman. And she lived in California. I live in Austin. This is my home office in Austin, Texas.
Uh-huh.
And we met on Zoom, but it was a referral.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing. So,
Networking,
um,
networking works.
networking absolutely works. 110%. Yes. So Ivan, before we let you go, I know that you've mentioned your new book a couple of times.
Yeah.
Please give everybody the title again and where they can purchase it. I'm assuming it's available on Amazon.
There it is. Networking is a marathon, not a sprint. It is available on Amazon. It hit in the top 10 of sales and marketing just a week ago. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, so 3 weeks or so. So, yeah, networking is a marathon, not a sprint. And each chapter is done like a mile in the marathon.
I love that.
So, yeah, so we did it
Fantastic.
that way, to match with the marathon concept.
And then for people who are interested in learning more about BNI and maybe either just want some more information, or
Yeah,
maybe they'd like to visit a meeting, which of course you can do for free,
yeah.
BNI.com.
BNI.com, and then just go to the contact us section of it and find out where there's a chapter near you. And of course, I have a website, ivanmisner.com, Misner, ivanmisner.com. It's all free blogs. I have books up there, links for books, but all my blogs are free. I've been blogging since 2007 once or twice a week since 2007. So there's lots of great content up there, including the butterfly effect of networking, which we talked about.
Oh, excellent. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think your network is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear.
Mm,
We live in a crazy world
yeah.
and we live in crazy times. And your network can help you through crazy times. And I've seen this over and over and over again. Earthquakes in California, tsunamis in Japan, fires in both California and Australia, hurricane in New Orleans. I've seen BNI members in their networks come together and help each other through those challenging times, whether they be natural disasters or financial disasters. We've been through multiple recessions, including the Great Recession in 2008, which we still grew. Our membership
Mm.
still grew in
Amazing.
2008. So your network is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear, and
Yeah.
build a powerful personal network. And remember that if it's a mile wide and only an inch deep, it'll never be very powerful. That you need a
Mm.
network that is both wide and in places deep, where you've really built relationships with other people.
Mhm. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. Our guest has been Dr. Ivan Misner, the founder of BNI and BNI's Chief Visionary Officer. Thank you so much. It's been my absolute pleasure, Ivan.
Thank you, Erika. It's a great interview. Thank you.
You take care. Thank you so much.